570 Radio in Fort Worth, WBAP.
Good morning, everyone. This is Norwood McClendon reporting. Fort Worth temperature 56 degrees, Dallas 55. Skies are cloudy, and very light rain is reported at both cities. President and Mrs. Kennedy arrived in Fort Worth from Houston late last night to an enthusiastic reception from huge crowds and spent the night in Suite 850 at Hotel Texas downtown. The President scheduled 2 speeches in Fort Worth this morning, the first to the general public, the other at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast. For WBAP News, here is Jack Brown reporting from Hotel Texas.
There's a light rain falling in downtown Fort Worth, and that may cut down on the size of the turnout for President Kennedy's parking lot speech. Mr. Kennedy is scheduled to make a short public talk, maybe 10 minutes, at 8:50 this morning. Indications are he will make the speech even if it's raining. It's still not known whether or not the First Lady will accompany the President to the parking lot, which is just south of the hotel. Mr. Kennedy will speak from a platform mounted on a truck. The hotel's marquee says, "Welcome, Mr. President," and under it stand 6 young co-eds from Carter Riverside High School. The girls got up at 3:30 this morning and arrived at the hotel at 5. They've been standing there ever since. A crowd already is gathered outside the hotel's grand ballroom, maybe 200 persons, and they seem to be concerned about finding seats, or at least finding some good ones. The President's ballroom speech, which was an early sellout, will begin shortly after 9. We don't know what he'll talk about. From here, Mr. Kennedy will motorcade to Carswell Air Force Base, where Air Force One will be waiting to fly him to Dallas Love Field. 6,000 persons greeted Mr. Kennedy when he arrived at Carswell last night. Hundreds more lined the route to the Texas Hotel, and about 4,000 persons were waiting for him at the hotel. All were cheering. The President said his reception was wonderful. This is Jack Brown reporting from the Grand Ballroom at the Texas Hotel.
For President Kennedy's public speech this morning, the public is asked to enter the parking lot from 9th Street. No cars will be permitted on the lot itself. Police Chief Hightower says that 8th Street will be blocked off between Main and Commerce, and that those streets plus 9th will be stopped to traffic if the crowd overflows into them. The President is expected to speak for about 10 minutes at the outside gathering and about twice as long at the breakfast. State Democratic leaders say they hope to announce a sellout crowd for a $100 a plate dinner honoring Mr. Kennedy in Austin tonight. This is the only announced political function of the President's Texas tour. Governor Connolly said yesterday ticket sales have far exceeded his earlier prediction of 2,500, and officials at Municipal Auditorium at Austin say 4,000 is about the maximum capacity for a sit-down dinner. Speaking there will be the President, Vice President Johnson, and Governor Connolly.
It's 19 minutes to 8, and from Hotel Texas, here is Frank Mills with a 570 Mike Side report.
Good morning, everyone. For a few hours that began about 8 hours ago, Fort Worth is the capital of the United States of America. It's a singular occasion, for at the same time we have with us today the President and the Vice President of the United States. In the dark hours before dawn, the sky was lighted by the golden glow of the outline of the skyline of the city of Fort Worth, reflecting the warmth of the welcome for the President and the First Lady. Here in the hotel there's an air of expectancy, almost a festival, party-like air. Almost all of the 2,000 guests have been seated. Most all of them already have been served. It has been going off just like clockwork this morning. We are located some 40 or 50 feet from the kitchen, through which the President and his party will make their entrance. Why the kitchen? Well, security reasons for one thing. Another, it is almost the direct route from the elevators to the ballroom and thence to the speaker's table. We arrived at 6 o'clock this morning, and already people were here gathering in the dark and in the rain from every vantage point that from where they could find a dry spot at least, to view the President. And of course, as the dry spots were taken up, then the people took to standing very patiently and quietly in the rain, awaiting the time when they could see the President. Of course, the kitchen force was here in force this morning, and I am sure long before we arrived, some very quick, simple arithmetic, something over 2,000 people to be served, and if they're going to have 2 eggs apiece, this is some 4,000 eggs that had to be broken and scrambled, and if we can project this a little further, I would imagine some 400 pounds of ham and over 200 gallons of coffee. So if you've been upset about making plans or overseeing a wedding reception or the club's annual Christmas party, you'll know what the force has been faced with here this morning. So the people are still assembling outside. For the public appearance the President will make in the parking lot directly across the street from the specially erected platform there. Because regardless of political persuasion, people are gathering for a real-life glimpse of the President of the United States. As one man said to me this morning as I walked among the crowd out there, after all, he is the President, and I got here early so I could get close enough to perhaps say, good morning, Mr. President, and welcome to Fort Worth. At various times during the morning, we will be interrupting the regular program schedule to bring you feature reports here from the Grand Ballroom, and also, of course, as the festivities, if we can call them that, and this is the air about the place, as they begin at approximately 8:45. That is the time the President is scheduled to address the people outside. We will bring you in its entirety the program here from the Grand Ballroom. So for the time being, this is Frank Mills returning you now to the studio.
570 WBAP, Fort Worth.
President Kennedy's parking lot speech is still 50 minutes away, but several hundred persons have already gathered to hear him. They're wearing raincoats and holding umbrellas, but the rain has stopped. Inside, in the Grand Ballroom, some 2,000 persons are in their seats for Mr. Kennedy's second speech. That will begin around 9:10. The breakfast menu called for eggs, 4,200 of them, Virginia ham, 65 big ones, 700 pounds of potatoes, 80 pounds of coffee, 72 gallons of orange juice, and an undetermined number of Parker House rolls. There's still no word on the subject of President Kennedy's breakfast speech. At the present time, Jimmy Ravito's combo is providing background music. The crowd is still coming in. People are being seated by the ushers, which includes TCU football coach Abe Martin. The head table is decked out with sprays of flowers, gladiolas, carnations, and something I can't recognize from here. Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy spent the night in Suite 850, a suite that has been outfitted with artwork from the French school, which Mrs. Kennedy prefers. The suite's gold carpet has been cleaned half a dozen times in the last few days. Every time they get it cleaned, cameramen plead for a few more pictures, and in getting them, they track dirt and mud on the carpet. 6 young co-eds from Carter Riverside High School apparently were among the first to show up this morning. They stationed themselves outside the hotel at 5 o'clock. After Mr. Kennedy's breakfast speech, he will motorcade to Carswell Air Force Base, where Air Force One will fly him over to Love Field in Dallas. This is Jack Brown reporting from the Grand Ballroom of the Hotel Texas.
The motorcade returning the presidential party to Carswell Air Force Base is scheduled to leave downtown Fort Worth at 10:30, with departure for Dallas at 11:15 a.m. The president will address a luncheon in Dallas, then go to Austin for a major speech tonight at a party fundraising dinner. Another Dallas visitor is former Vice President Nixon, who's on a business trip for his New York law firm. He's made plans to leave Dallas this morning prior to President Kennedy's arrival. Nixon predicted Thursday that President Kennedy will discard Vice President Johnson as a running mate next year if the race looks close.
It's 21 minutes before 9, and from Hotel Texas, here is Frank Mills with an 8:20 Mike Side report.
And we, with some 2,000 or more other people, are still awaiting the arrival of the President, who in approximately 6 minutes, if plans hold up, will be speaking to the crowd outside, rain or no rain, in the parking lot directly across the street from the south entrance to the Texas Hotel. He'll be speaking from a specially erected platform there. Political observers, are saying that the President's appearance in Texas this time will be observed as a weather vane for the 1964 campaign. If that is so, the President can point to his abilities as a rainmaker, and if he can sell that idea, he ought to gain a lot of support, because if there's one thing that all of Texas has agreed upon, it is that we do need rain. We've had it a couple of days ago, we have it today, and there is an outside chance at least that they might break up long enough for him to make a dry appearance out there in the parking lot, but if it doesn't, then it would be a wet one according to plans. Things should clear pretty well by the time of his arrival in Dallas this afternoon, and better than a 50-50 chance that festivities, the parade, etc. there will be conducted without showers. But the showers will begin to form again. The instability will still be with us, and probably the rain will follow the president on down to Austin. Well, as I mentioned earlier this morning, Nick Ramsey, who was with us here at our WBAP microphones today, has been circulating through the crowd with the tape recorder. That shows you how long I've been doing this. The tape recorder, getting interviews with people. And here are some interesting comments that he recorded about an hour or two ago.
Let's talk to a lady here at the Presidential Breakfast in Hotel Texas. Your name, please?
Mrs. Edward Moore.
Where are you from, Ms. Moore?
I'm from Fort Worth.
You're from Fort Worth. What, did you get up early this morning, earlier than usual?
I got up at 5 o'clock. First time I've set the alarm in years.
I see. What brings you to the breakfast primarily? Is it to see the president, or is it the charm of the First Lady? What is the most attractive element of the presidential breakfast?
The most important thing is to see the president, then to see Mrs. Kennedy. I think she's lovely, but I think our president does come first.
I see.
She's a lovely person.
Well, you look like you're happy to be here.
Very happy.
That's good. Let's talk to another lady here. What is your name, please?
Mrs. Bob Cartwright.
And where are you from, Miss Cartwright?
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth. Well, we're well represented this morning.
Yes.
What is the particular attraction here for you?
Well, I agree with the First Lady there that our president is most important.
And I'm sure you're looking forward to a good breakfast.
Oh, yes, after staying here this long.
How long have you been here this morning?
Since 6:15.
Since 6:15. You've been here in the hotel?
Yes.
Well, it looks like everyone got up early. I remember when I came in at 6 o'clock, there were a group of youngsters who had been standing at the front of the hotel since about 3 o'clock.
Oh.
And so it seems that the President and the First Lady and their being in Fort Worth and in Dallas appeals to a lot of people.
Yes, I'm sure.
Let's talk to this gentleman here. Is this Mr. Cartwright?
Yes.
All right, sir.
Bob Cartwright.
Yes, sir. And I know you look like you've been looking forward to the breakfast.
Well,
you're one of the fortunate 2,000, I believe.
Yes, but I waked up at 2:30 and couldn't go back to sleep, so this is a rough day.
I see. Is it, do you like the idea that the president is visiting our town?
Oh, yes, I do. I think it's...
How do you feel that Fort Worth, he will be impressed by Fort Worth as a city?
Well, I think Fort Worth has really turned out for him. I think the business houses turning on the lights last night, the work that the Chamber of Commerce has done is going to make a very lasting impression, I hope, on the president and also the vice president.
Well, that's Mr. Cartwright.
Yes.
And his idea is concerning how Fort Worth has turned out to welcome the president. And I know that you're glad to be at the breakfast. Thank you so much, both you and Mrs. Cartwright, for talking with us.
Thank you.
Let's talk to this gentleman here. Your name, sir?
John Herrick.
Mr. Herrick, you're up bright and early this morning. Is it your usual procedure to get up early in the morning?
Not quite this early, but I really feel that history will recognize this man as being one of the greatest presidents we've had. And so I do not want to lose the opportunity just because of a few hours sleep to see him.
I see. I've heard some talk that this is a non-political trip. Do you believe that evaluation holds as of this moment?
Well, I think so, because I think regardless of party, a sense of excitement has been going through Fort Worth for the last 4 or 5 days. And the fact that our president is here is, I think, enough to say that it is a non-political trip.
All right, so thank you very much for talking with us. And we'll be talking with some other people here at the Hotel Texas Presidential Breakfast throughout the morning. Some of the 2,000 who will be at the breakfast itself. This is Nick Ramsey, returning you to the studio.
WBAP 820 in Fort Worth, Dallas. It's 15 minutes to 9, and from Hotel Texas, here again, Frank Mills with another 820 Mike Side report.
Mrs. Johnson, along with other members of the official party, have already made the entrance into the ballroom and are standing at the speaker's table. They are now being seated, so I presume that the president and perhaps the vice president are appearing across the street, and it is hoped that Mrs. Kennedy will accompany the Vice President there, too. The Texas Boys Choir are here. They have been entertaining the assembled guests. We are, as I say, waiting now with an air of expectancy. There is really electricity in the air at this particular moment. Let us go back to one of the interviews that Nick Ramsey had this morning. We might interrupt this in the proceedings here to bring you in its entirety the program as the President makes his entry. Here is Nick Ramsey again with one of his recorded reports.
Yes, sir. Well, Mr. Carney, do you usually get up this early of a morning to have your breakfast?
Well, I work at General Dynamics, and I have to rise pretty early, so it wasn't too difficult for me this morning. No.
I see. Of course, it's going to be just a little bit. It's going to be just a little bit different this morning, though.
Sure.
You're going to have breakfast with about 2,000 other people.
Well, we're looking forward to it.
I'm sure you are.
No.
And this is.
Mrs. Florence Sherman.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is the thrill of my life, especially last night when I shook hands with our wonderful president and his gorgeous wife. I never will forget it.
You must have been in Carswell last night.
No, I was out here. I stayed all night at the Hotel Texas because I didn't want to fight the traffic.
That's one way to beat the
And
traffic.
it's been wonderful, every minute of it.
What is the main attraction for you, Miss Sherman?
The main attraction is the president and his wife.
Well,
That is the attraction.
I see. I just wondered if you wanted to distinguish between one and the other, the first
Oh,
lady.
no, I love them both. I love them both.
All right. Thank you very much for talking with us, Miss Sherman. And your
Good
name, please?
morning. Miss Joe Brown from Arlington.
From Arlington.
Yes, it was raining when we left, too.
That's right. But it didn't stop you, did it?
No. I would have liked to have just come over and spent the night like the other ladies.
Do you have any... do you, at this time, which is before the breakfast, have any idea what the President will talk about this morning?
No, but I wished he could talk about the Trinity River.
I see. I think he plans to talk about that in Dallas.
Yes, that's what I'm afraid of. But that'll be all right, just so he discusses
All
it,
right.
you know.
Fine. Thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you.
And this lady, your name, please?
Mrs. Walter Huzervich,
Yes, ma'am. Where are you from?
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth. Well, I'll tell you, we have a lot of Fort Worth people here this morning. This lady I just talked to from Arlington is the only out-of-towner. And is this something out of the ordinary for you? I mean, not attending a presidential breakfast, but getting up this early to eat breakfast.
No, it is not. I get up at 5 every morning.
What will be the most thrilling or entertaining or most interesting aspect of the breakfast to you?
Oh, well, seeing the president, of course.
Just seeing the president. Do you have any idea about what you'd like for him to say, or possibly what you expect the first lady to wear for breakfast, other than a rain jacket, that is?
I have no idea. Anything he says, I'm sure will be very interesting to all of us.
I see. Thank you very much for talking with us. Might I talk
When
to
is
this?
this going to be aired? When is this going to be on air?
I'll tell you about that in just a moment. Yes. Let me talk to this gentleman here. You look like a gentleman who would have some very definite ideas. Your name, sir?
I'm Dr. Edwin A. Elliott.
Dr. Elliott? I know that you're happy to be at the breakfast. You look like
I am. I'm greatly devoted to the president.
I see. Do you have any ideas, Dr. Elliott, what the president might talk about during his 20 minutes at the breakfast this morning?
Well, I imagine that he will stress the economic situation and probably his plans for progress for the country.
I see.
I think he would emphasize that. And no doubt the industrialization of Texas.
Do you think that Fort Worth has welcomed him as warmly as you would have liked?
Well, I would have liked very much for the school children to have seen our president and lady. And other than that, I think they've done an excellent job. But I do wish that all of the people of Fort Worth would have had an opportunity to see him.
I think a lot of the people of Fort Worth agree with you, Dr. Elliott. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Let's talk to this gentleman back here. Your name, sir?
Reverend Marshall E. Hodge.
Reverend Hodge, have you any idea perhaps what the president might talk about this morning at the breakfast? Do you anticipate anything in your own mind as to what he might speak about?
Well, I'm sure he's going to say something that would give some indication of his hope for passing his civil rights bill in Congress.
I have heard that mentioned, that this could be a possible topic for this particular breakfast, since he has announced his topic for the Dallas engagement. Do you ordinarily get up this early, Reverend?
No, I'm about 2 hours early this morning.
I see. Well, you look like you might be ready for breakfast, and it's so nice of you to talk with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk to this lady right here. Your name is what, please?
Sephora Hicks.
Miss Hicks, do you get up this early of a morning?
No.
You don't?
No.
You did this morning,
Oh,
though,
yes.
didn't you?
I didn't want to sleep last night.
I see. Have you seen the president before?
No.
Uh-huh.
No more than just on the television.
Yes, yes.
I want to see him in person this morning.
Yeah, well, that's all figured. There are about 2,000 others waiting here, and there are many outside.
Yes.
Well, I sure thank you for talking with us. And,
thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Nick Ramsey at the Presidential Breakfast Hotel Texas, returning you now to our studio.
This is David Daniel just outside Hotel Texas on the parking lot, awaiting the arrival of President Kennedy for his outside speech at 8:45. A police captain has estimated the crowd at 2,000 people. They're about 50 deep, forming an arch behind wooden barricades and forming a semicircle. An announcement was just made that President Kennedy, along with Vice President Johnson, Senator Yarborough, and Representative Jim Wright, would be here in just a moment, and urged the crowd to bear with us. And that was the result, an outburst by the crowd. And here's the President. President Kennedy is flanked by Representative Jim Wright. You hear the crowd applaud him. He's making his way across 8th Street. Now Representative Jim Wright.
Our friends, this is the proudest day in the history of Fort Worth and Tarrant County. Before I present our highly honored guests, let me briefly introduce those of our home folks who have helped make this event possible. The distinguished president of the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, Raymond E. Buck. The State Executive Committee woman from Tarrant County, Mrs. David O. Ballou, Jr. Our energetic, able State Senator Don Kennard. May I present to you the senior senator from the state of Texas, the Honorable Ralph W. Yarborough. And one who hardly needs an introduction, Fort Worth's own distinguished governor of Texas, John B. Connally. And now it is my high honor and great privilege to present to you the greatest Texan of them all, who has reflected more glory and credit upon the Lone Star State, done more good for the Lone Star State, served the nation more admirably than any other Texan in the history of our state, the Vice President of the United States, Lyndon B. Johnson.
Congressman Wright, Mr. President, Senator Yarborough, Governor Connally, ladies and gentlemen, it is my high honor and my great privilege to present to the good people of Fort Worth our able, our beloved, our fearless leader of the United States and all the free world, the President of the United States.
Mr. Vice President, Jim Wright, Governor, Senator Yarborough, Mr. Buck, ladies and gentlemen, there are no faint hearts in Fort Worth, and I appreciate your being here this morning. Mrs. Kennedy is organizing herself. It takes longer, but of course she looks better than we do when she does it. But we appreciate your welcome.
This city's been a great western city, the defense of the West, cattle, oil, and all the rest. It has believed in strength in this city, and strength in this state, and strength in this country. What we're trying to do in this country and what we're trying to do around the world, I believe, is quite simple. And that is to build a military structure which will defend the vital interests of the United States. And in that great cause, Fort Worth, as it did in World War II, as it did in developing the best bomber system in the world, the B-58, and as it will now do in developing the best fighter system in the world, the TFX, Fort Worth will play its proper part. And that is why we have placed so much emphasis in the last 3 years in building a defense system second to none. Until now, the United States is stronger than it's ever been in its history. And secondly, we believe that the new environment, space, the new sea, is also an area where the United States should be second to none. And this state of Texas and the United States is now engaged in the most concentrated effort in history to provide leadership in this area as it must here on Earth. And this is our second great effort. And next December, next month, the United States will fire the largest booster in the history of the world, putting us ahead of the Soviet Union in that area for the first time in our history. And thirdly, for the United States to fulfill its obligations around the world requires that the United States move forward economically, that the people of this country participate in rising prosperity. And it is a fact in 1962 and the first 6 months of 1963, the economy of the United States grew not only faster than nearly every Western country, which had not been true in the 50s, but also grew faster than the Soviet Union itself. That's the kind of strength the United States needs economically, in space, militarily. And in the final analysis, that strength depends upon the willingness of the citizens of the United States to assume the burdens of leadership. I know one place where they are. Here in this rain, in Fort Worth, in Texas, in the United States, we're going forward. Thank you.
The President now takes his...
Thank you for being here. The President and Mrs. Kennedy will begin the motorcade here after the Chamber of Commerce breakfast is over. Thank you so much.
That was Representative Tim Wright. Now the President makes his way to greet some more of the crowd, walking around the barricades, touching the hands of those around the barricade. This is the crowd as they shake hands with President Kennedy. He's making his way through the crowd. We have a long microphone which is about 14 inches long. It looks sort of like a long pistol. Secret Service agent approached us and says, just don't put that in front of the President. The President is weeding his way slowly through the crowd as many more crowd around him, trying to reach out, stretch out, touch his hand. Many have cameras trying to take pictures. This is David Daniel on the parking lot of Hotel Texas, now returning you to the studio.
We
Real good, Jack.
Now the president has decided to go shake the hand of the sheriff's posse rider.
Seven minutes before 9, and from Hotel Texas, here again is Frank Mills.
And I have just been trying to crane my neck around the corner of the doorway here to see if there were as many people outside in the mezzanine as there are inside. Of course, we couldn't get that many on the mezzanine, but there are a good many people, almost stacked, I guess you would say, out there. They were unable to get tickets this morning, and I guess they've been unable to get through the lobby to the parking lot across the street to hear the president's remarks to the public there. We are still awaiting his arrival. In the background, besides the general crowd noise, you hear the Texas Boys Choir. While we are waiting, let's pick up some of the singing.
She has said, ever since my love I left, that is why I wore in black. Howdy, 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 howdy. I said a little bird, I'll tell you, one side of the umbrella too. She was a sure, she was a out, so I got me to speak for my ball. Howdy, 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 with a howdy, howdy. I said chickadee with a little bird, just very fine, just kick back for my fly away up to my nest, for I am wide within some bed. Howdy, 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 with a howdy, howdy. So big, if I had him, I'd feel like me. But he was king so high, which gives me a good sweat inside. I said, go on, so I can call your diggity, diggity, from the time and get you in my hopes the farmer shoot you dead. Howdy, 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 howdy.
Of course, adding to the color in the pageantry, the singing of the Texas Boys Choir, entertaining the diners while we are waiting President Kennedy's arrival. And to add further color to the spectacle this morning, the Eastern Hills High School Band at the far end of the ballroom, and they will be playing, I understand, Hail to the Chief with the entry of the presidential party. Yes?
Frank, the president has just completed his speech outside. There is a crowd of about 2,000 also out there. On the fringes, they are milling about. But he has just completed his speech outside the Hotel Texas and will shortly be entering the grand ballroom here in the hotel.
Were you able to get outside, Nick, to find out what he had to say out there, or were you unable to get through the lobby?
Well, I didn't go through the lobby to the press room, and I stuck my head out the window, Frank, and I could hear part of what he was saying. And I'm sure that the note that he set there will be the same general pattern that he will follow in here. We expect the president to enter the room at any moment now, because it's only a minute and a half from where he spoke outside the Hotel Texas at the parking lot to the room here where the breakfast is being held, Frank.
Of course, the president likes people, and the people like the president. So I don't suppose he will be able to move through the crowd with any great speed. He will stop, I'm sure, to shake hands with some others who will want to shake hands with him. And I hope the man who was here so early this morning said he wanted to say, "Good morning, Mr. President, and welcome to Fort Worth," got his opportunity, because he was here to see the President of the United States.
I noticed, Frank, from the response of the crowd outside,
that his speech, which was of only about 4 minutes duration, was well received. It was broken by about 6 times by applause from the crowd there. The traffic around the hotel here and had stopped, come to a complete standstill. I noticed one automobile had stopped on the main thoroughfare. He was the only car going south in his lane. They had all stopped. They had crawled up on the car. The children were on the hood, and the father was on the trunk of the car, and it was stopped right there in the middle of traffic. Traffic is rather slow at this moment around the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth.
Well, we can well imagine that, and it sounds as though some of the children will be late for school this morning since school was not dismissed for the event. Some students, I noticed, and this has been noted earlier, I think, by Nick, perhaps, that had been excused for the first part of the morning at least, until they could see and hear what the president had to say this morning, and they had excuses to get back into school at something like 9:30. So they should be able to make that and on time. We are standing here at the south end of the ballroom in Hotel Texas, facing the speaker's table, which is stretched across the north end of the ballroom. It is beautifully decorated with, as well as I can tell from here, white chrysanthemums and red gladioli, and it is a beautiful sight. The front of the table's draped in greenery. Of course, the flag of the United States at our left as we face the rostrum, and the presidential flag on the right.
I have word at this moment, Frank, that the president is inside the hotel, so we can expect him momentarily. Frank, I noticed also the absence from my point of view. I didn't have the best view of the stand, the speaker's stand outside, but I did not see either Mrs. Johnson or Mrs. Kennedy on the platform.
Well, I'll tell you why you didn't see Mrs. Johnson. She made a very unobtrusive entrance a while ago with the crowd of people who came in and were seated at the table, and you have to look. But
there she is,
sitting up there very
yes,
quietly,
I see. Yes,
and
yes.
she just slipped in.
Well, I suppose the president is meeting the first lady in the hotel, and they will, of course, come up together. But he is in the hotel now.
What were you able to observe out there, David, this morning? This is David Daniel.
Well, I was impressed with the applause and the cheers that Senator Ralph Yarborough got, especially in light of last night's snub he gave Governor Connally, and I think this was some indication of his strength here in Fort Worth.
Let me interrupt. Everyone is standing. This apparently the president and the party are entering the ballroom. I think we can be prepared to hear the band burst into Hail to the Chief, which will probably be drowned by the applause from 2,000 people. Some of the younger and more agile ones have forsaken the floor and are standing on their chairs, and the president is making his entrance at the present time. And at this point, we can only judge from the applause that he is making the entrance, because the people standing on chairs, the cameraman, television, newsreel, all the various news media being represented are on a platform to our right. They are leaning out past the cameras now into our line of vision. So as the applause continues, it is our surmise that the presidential party is making its appearance. I am surprised we do not hear the band. Congressman Jim Wright taking his place on the platform. Excuse me while I try to crane over the crowd and see if I can pick out who is approaching. I'm sorry, I cannot. All I see are heads bobbing by. So I judge the president has not made an appearance. Am I right, Nick? Can you see over the crowd? You're taller than I am.
Barely. That's anticipatory applause. I think it has to be lined up, and I believe that now he is entering the room.
Now the president enters, and here is the Hail to the Chief.
President now is walking to his place behind the rostrum at the Speaker's platform. And as we anticipated, the most that you can hear probably from the band is the bass drum and the applause and the cheers that are greeting the President's appearance now. The Vice President, of course, is with him. They are both on the platform and in appointed places. Mrs. Kennedy beaming, and that personality just seems to wrap up the whole room in its enthusiasm and warmth.
Oh, that's a high school man.
Now we're going to have the pleasure of hearing from Fort Worth's finest, the Texas Boys Choir.
The eyes of Texas are upon you, all the year from there. The eyes of Texas are upon you, you cannot get away. Do the things you can escape them, at night or early in the morn. The eyes of Texas are upon you, till they rumble before.
Well, the President responded to that with a broad smile and a hand clap, and with the rest of the people, he stood to listen. And here's the Texas Boys Choir.
He left his home in fire, youth went ranging far away, went ranging far away. He never sleep within a pit, no comfort would he know, just like a brave old Texie, and a-ranging he would go, a-ranging he would go. Oh, Mustang Gray was the hero of his day, no more the Indian will he fight, for he heard his last war wound had been going to another route, where they haven't any enemy to fight. When Texas was invaded, they captured Mustang Gray. He wore the yoke of bondage through the streets of Monterey, the streets of Monterey. And came a señorita before the light of day, who opened wide the prison door and bid him on his way, and bid him on his way. Oh, Mustang Gray was the hero of his day, no more the iron will he fight, for he turned another land, and he's ranging in a land where they haven't any enemies to fight. And when the inspector's wife was sent, it was his last command to bury him on Texas soil beside the Rio Grande, beside the Rio Grande. And there's a lonely cobbler with nothing by his grave. They bow his head in every house, the bravest of the brave, the bravest of the brave. Oh, Mustang Gray was the hero of the day, the holy finger of the right. May his spirit rest in peace, that can trouble peace, and they haven't any enemy to fight.
ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct privilege to introduce or to present to you the guests at the head table, leaving for the moment those that you'll hear from later. First of all, it is a personal pleasure for me to present the most gallant, able Texan of them all, one who has done so much for Texas and America, the distinguished Vice President of the United States, Lyndon B. Johnson. And his lovely wife, companion, Lady Bird. Next, we have the pleasure of presenting Fort Worth's own, the talented Governor of Texas, Governor John B. Connally. And his sweet wife, Nellie. We're honored to have with us today the distinguished and able senior citizen of Texas, Senator Ralph W. Yarborough. We have had many able congressmen from this district, none of which have ever surpassed in dedication, loyalty, and capability to country and to district the Honorable Jim Wright. Next, we have the distinguished West Texan, the people's lawyer, Attorney General Waggoner Carr. And the attractive Mrs. Carr. Guiding our House of Representatives with a firm hand and with great success is our Speaker, Byron Connell. And his wife, Mrs. Connell. Near here on my left, the able, dedicated, hard-working mayor of this vibrant and vigorous city, who is giving us a tremendous administration as mayor, Mayor Barrett H. Friedman. And his wife, Mrs. Friedman. Only one county in the United States, I have been told, is free of debt, Mr. President, and that is Tarrant County. Represented here this morning by our County Judge Marvin B. Simpson, Jr. And Mrs. Simpson. Assisting Substituting at times for our mayor, we have a very fine mayor pro tem. He's been a leader here in political and business circles for many years, Willard Barr. And Mrs. Barr. In the state Senate, we are ably and vigorously represented by our Senator Don Kennard. And Mrs. Kennard. In the Chamber of Commerce, my work has been made easy by the able assistance of the vice presidents and the staff, directors, members. Here this morning it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Marion L. Hicks, Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce, and General Dynamics. And Mrs. Hicks. Also of tremendous value, assistance to the Chamber of Commerce the last 2 years has been our Vice President Jack W. Melcher of Lennox Manufacturing Company and Mrs. Melcher. The fellow who really does the hard work at the Chamber of Commerce and who I believe is, well, he's finally come up to take his seat. He's been out there working. Is our very talented Milton A. Atkinson, Vice President and General Manager. And Mrs. Atkinson. The Central Trades Council and the Building and Construction Trades are ably represented here in Fort Worth by Mr. O.C. Yancey, President, Central Trades Council, and Mrs. Yancey. Completes the introductions, except for those who have spoken or will speak later. All right. Now is an event that I know all of you have been waiting for.
And this event that we have been waiting for has been the arrival of Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy. And the ladies are up en masse, standing on their chairs. Everyone is beaming. David, please, quickly, while this applause is going on, what was it the President said outside this morning about Mrs. Kennedy?
He said Mrs. Kennedy is not here because she's prettying herself up, and it takes her a little longer than it does us, but then she's prettier than us.
Well, she is a beautiful sight to behold, and the President standing beaming, greeting her now as she takes her place with him on the platform. She has been seated, and the smile is still on everyone's face. The President himself looks extremely pleased at the reception she was accorded, and she sits there with that very gracious smile, so warm, so friendly. And now, again, Mr. Buck.
There is always something that adds beauty, life, and touch to the lives of people. No one in our time has done more in that respect than the lovely, beautiful First Lady of our land, Mrs. Jackie Kennedy. At this moment, the city where the West begins is the most important and the most honored city in the world. Our great, courageous, and brilliant leader of the world's strongest nation, its greatest power for peace and for freedom. He has honored us with his presence and that of the charming and lovely First Lady. Our hearts and our arms are open to you. May God bless you and cause his light to shine on you and on your companions and your family. Ladies and gentlemen, I proudly present the President of the United States.
I know now why everyone in Texas, Fort Worth, is so thin, having gotten up and down about 9 times. This is what you do every morning. Mr. Buck, Mr. Vice President, Governor Connally, Senator Yarborough, Jim Wright, members of the congressional delegation, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Attorney General, ladies and gentlemen. 2 years ago, I said that, introduced myself in Paris by saying that I was the man who had accompanied Mrs. Kennedy to Paris. I'm getting somewhat that same sensation as I travel around Texas. Nobody wonders what Lyndon and I wear. I'm glad to be here in Jim Wright City. About 35 years ago, a congressman from California, just been elected, received a letter from an irate constituent which said, during your campaign you promised to have the Sierra Madre Mountains reforested. You've been in office for 1 month and you haven't done so. Well, no one in Fort Worth has been that unreasonable, but in some ways he has had the Sierra Madre Mountains reforested. And here in Fort Worth, he's contributed to its growth. He speaks for Fort Worth. He speaks for the country. And I don't know any city that's better represented in the Congress of the United States than Fort Worth. And if there are any Democrats here this morning, I'm sure you won't hold that against them. 3 years ago, last September, I came here on the Vice President and spoke at Burke Burnett Park. And I called in that speech for national security policy and a national security system which was second to none. A position which said not first but, if, when, and how, but first. That city responded to that call as it has through its history. And we have been putting that pledge into practice ever since. And I want to say a word about that pledge here in Fort Worth, which understands national defense and its importance to the security of the United States. During the days of the Indian War, this city was a fort. During the days of World War I, even before the United States got into the war, Royal Canadian Air Force pilots were training here. During the days of World War II, The great Liberator bombers, on which my brother flew with his co-pilot from this city, were produced here. First non-stop flight around the world took off and returned here in a plane built in factories here. The first truly intercontinental bomber, the B-36, was produced here. The B-58, which is the finest weapon system in the world today, which it demonstrated most recently in flying from Tokyo to London with an average speed of nearly 1,000 miles per hour, is a Fort Worth project. The Iroquois helicopter from Fort Worth is a mainstay in our fight against the guerrillas in South Vietnam. The transportation of crews between our missile sites is done in planes produced here in Fort Worth. So wherever the confrontation may occur, and in the last 3 years it's occurred at least 3 occasions, in Laos, in Berlin, and in Cuba, and it will again, wherever it occurs, the products of Fort Worth and the men of Fort Worth provide us with a sense of security. And in the not-too-distant future, a new Fort Worth product, and I'm glad that there was a table separating Mr. Hicks and myself, a new Fort Worth product the TFX, Tactical Fighter Experimental. Nobody knows what those words mean, but that's what they mean. Tactical Fighter Experimental will serve the forces of freedom and will be the #1 airplane in the world today. There's been a good deal of discussion of the long and hard-fought competition to win the TFX contract, but very little discussion about what this plane will do. It will be the first operational aircraft ever produced that can literally spread its wings through the air. It will thus give us a single plane capable of carrying out missions of speed as well as distance, able to fly very far in one form or very fast in another. It can take off from rugged, short airstrips, enormously increasing the Air Force's ability to participate in limited wars. The same basic plane will serve the Navy's carriers, saving the taxpayers at least $1 billion in cost if they built separate planes for the Navy and the Air Force. The government of Australia, by purchasing $125 million of TFX planes before they are even off the drawing boards, has already testified to the merit of this plane, and at the same time, it's confident in the ability of Fort Worth to meet its schedule. In all these ways, the success of our national defense depends upon this city in the western United States, 10,000 miles from Vietnam, 5,000 or 6,000 miles from Berlin, thousands of miles from trouble spots in Latin America, in Africa, or the Middle East. And yet Fort Worth and what it does and what it produces participates in all these great historic events. Texas as a whole and Fort Worth bear particular responsibility for this national defense effort. For military procurement in this state totals nearly $1.25 billion, fifth highest among all the states of the Union. There are more military personnel on active duty in this state than any in the nation save one. And it's not Massachusetts. Any in the nation save one with a combined military-civilian defense payroll of well over $1 billion. I don't recite these for any partisan purpose. They're the result of American determination to be second to none. And as a result of the effort which this country has made in the last 3 years, we are second to none. In the past 3 years, we have increased the defense budget of the United States by over 20%, increased the program of acquisition for Polaris submarines from 24 to 41, increased our Minuteman missile purchase program by more than 75%, doubled the number of strategic bombers and missiles on alert, doubled the number of nuclear weapons available in the strategic alert forces, increased the tactical nuclear forces deployed in Western Europe by over 60%, added 5 combat-ready divisions to the armies of the United States, and 5 tactical fighter wings to the Air Force of the United States, increased our strategic airlift capability by 75%, and increased our special counterinsurgency forces, which are engaged now in South Vietnam, by 600%. I hope those who want a strong America and place it on some signs will also place those figures next to it. This is not an easy effort. This requires sacrifice by the people of the United States. But this is a very dangerous and uncertain world. As I said earlier, on 3 occasions in the last 3 years, the United States has had a direct confrontation. No one can say when it will come again. No one expects that our life will be easy. Certainly not in this decade, and perhaps not in this century. But we should realize what a burden and responsibility the people of the United States have borne for so many years. Here, a country which lived in isolation, divided and protected by the Atlantic and the Pacific, uninterested in the struggles of the world around it. Here, in the short space of 18 years after the Second World War, we put ourselves by our own will and by necessity into defensive alliances with countries all around the globe. Without the United States, South Vietnam would collapse overnight. Without the United States, the SEATO alliance would collapse overnight. Without the United States, the CENTO alliance would collapse overnight. Without the United States, there would be no NATO, and gradually Europe would drift into neutralism and indifference. Without the effort of the United States and the Alliance for Progress, the communist advance onto the mainland of South America would long ago have taken place. So this country, which desires only to be free, which desires to be secure, which desires to live at peace for 18 years under 3 different administrations, has borne more than its share of the burden, has stood watch for more than its number of years. I don't think that we are fatigued or tired. We would like to live as we once lived, but history will not permit it. The communist balance of power is still strong. The balance of power is still on the side of freedom. We are still the keystone and the arch of freedom, and I think we will continue to do as we have done in our past, our duty, and the people of Texas will be in the lead. So I'm glad to come. I'm glad to come to this state, which has played such a significant role in so many efforts in this century, and to say that here in Fort Worth, you people will be playing a major role in the maintenance of the security of the United States for the next 10 years. I'm confident, as I look to the future, that our chances for security, our chances for peace, are better than they've been in the past. And the reason is because we're stronger. And with that strength is a determination to not only maintain the peace, but also the vital interests of the United States. To that great cause, Texas and the United States are committed. Thank you.
So the applause acknowledging the President's remarks, flashbulbs popping, suddenly quiet as Mr. Buck again.
Your visit with us in Fort Worth today, the things you have said have refreshed and renewed our appreciation of your great leadership and courage. You have brought rain to moisten our pastures and our fields. You have brought sunshine in our hearts. No, we know that you don't wear a hat. We couldn't let you leave Fort Worth without providing you with some protection against the rain.
The President has received the traditional Western hat. He wants to find out how you put it on, so I handed it to Mr. Buck to put on. Now, smilingly, he takes it back. He is teasing the crowd now with motions whether or not he's going to put on... Here he is.
On Monday, if you'll come up there, you'll have a chance to see it then.
Again, Mr. Buck.
That Texas hat is presented to you by Washer Brothers, one of the oldest men's stores in Texas. And to protect you against local enemies in the manner that you are protecting this nation against our foreign enemies, and to keep the rattlesnakes on Vice President Johnson's ranch from striking you, we want to present this pair of boots.
The President is enjoying this.
We won't ask you to put them on. Here. The boots are presented by Mr. John Justin, former mayor of Fort Worth, manufacturer of the most walked-about boots in the world. And Mrs. Kennedy, as you ride to the hounds or walk to the rattlesnakes, we want you to have protection too.
Before Mrs. Kennedy gets a pair of boots, perhaps she'll wear them at the ranch. It's quite an equestrian, and it would be her first opportunity to ride a quarter horse. Again, Mr. Buck.
Before the benediction, I'd like to present Mrs. Granville Walker, the wife of Dr. Granville Walker, who will pronounce the benediction. Mrs. Granville Walker. After Dr. Walker gives the benediction, we ask that you please remain seated until the President and Mrs. Kennedy have made their exit. Dr. Granville Walker.
Let us be in the spirit of prayer. The Lord bless all nations with a desire for peace. The Lord bless our own beloved nation with rectitude and prosperity, and grant us to achieve justice for all within it. The Lord bless our President and all in places of responsibility with wisdom and with health equal to their tasks. And now the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you and give you peace both now and forever. Amen.
President and Mrs. Kennedy are shaking hands with the people at the speaker's table, one at a time, and they are making their way slowly, and that's a long way down to the end of the table there. They will be leaving momentarily, and of course they will be going to Carswell Air Force Base, from there to Dallas, and we will keep our fingers crossed for a cessation for the time being, at least, of the showers. President and Mrs. Kennedy have just about completed the handshakes, the thank yous. They are smiling broadly, sincerely. Now they pause to shake hands with members of the Texas Boys Choir, and they are falling over one another to shake the President's hand and Mrs. Kennedy's hand, both of them, beaming is the only word that can describe them as they make their exit now through the crowd. And he pauses here and there to shake hands with the people once again. Although I am standing on a chair here at the south end of the ballroom, it is difficult to see them because other people are climbing on the chairs out in front of me. I assume from the direction of the heads as they turn that they have just about passed through the aisle and are entering the kitchen to make their exit. People are beginning to leave, and they were requested, as you heard from Mr. Buck, to keep their places until the President and his lady made their exit. Well, that just about concludes, or it does conclude the program from here now this morning, with just one thing, if I may add. Behind the speaker's table up there, just to the left of the rostrum, was this message from the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce hanging on the wall. Members of the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce must be missionaries of progress, not just beneficiaries of the efforts of others. So we return you now to the studio.
Total information news from WBAP Fort Worth.